So, over the years, there haven't been a lot of very good Game of Thrones reunions since that great monumental show ended so poorly, with sort of a whimper as opposed to a bang, and in shambles. Really, it was a wreck, and so there haven't been a lot of actors getting together to fondly reminisce, or any sort of projects that even include two or more of the same actors. But there actually have been one or two, and those movies have sucked terribly, like The Eternals or The Beast Within, which saw Jon Snow and I think it was Gerald Mormont, the guy who played Gerald Mormont on the show. They reunited for a movie about a werewolf, only it also sucked pretty bad and had a horrible, ham fisted, kind of bullcrap twist at the end, which only works if everything that happens in that movie is taken to be a complete lie, like a total unreliable narrator situation, which isn't it's like not even a clever unreliable narrator like Shutter Island or Memento. And yes, I know Memento has its problems, and Shutter Island too, but I digress. I'm not here to talk about The Beast Within, or Shutter Island, or Game of Thrones, even. I'm here to talk about The Dreadful. The Dreadful, which again stars Jon Snow, right? That is to say, Kit Harington, and also, and perhaps even more importantly, Sophie Turner, Sansa Stark. And she's sort of she is the main character. And it's set in the Middle Ages, and as far as I can tell, people kind of hate the movie. Like they think it's boring and lame and kind of cheap, which honestly I don't see it. Like, no, I genuinely don't see it. Like, this isn't the greatest movie ever made. I'm not saying it's the greatest movie ever made, but it's not nearly the steaming pile of crap that people seem to think that it is. And to tell you the truth, it's a million times better than The Beast Within, say, and sort of restores my faith in like Harrington's ability to pick a good role. Like he seems to have just kind of bounced from one project to another, and he found a good one in this. Yet no one seems to think so. But I digress again, because the movie isn't this grand, like, historical epic, right? There are no massive battles or incredible set piece moments. Maybe like there's some clever work here, good cinematography, I think, and interesting uses for what technology they had to work with. Um, it's about the the Dreadful is about a woman, Sophie Turner's character, Anne, her name is. Her husband went off to war, and she has been living with her mother-in-law. Uh, and the old woman is completely bonkers. She is kind of evil, like some really good acting. All right, to be honest, there isn't really a bad performance in the movie necessarily. Some are better than others, but like the old woman makes for a very complex character, and thereby makes Anne more complex in the long run, because it's not a new story. It's not a new story by any stretch of the imagination, dealing with duty and faith, right, in the face of that very medieval depression and desperation, right? They don't know if they'll survive the winter. They don't know if they're going to survive to winter. And because they're poor and they're starving, and there is like forever that sense of like want in everything throughout the movie. They are all very, very envious and desperate and trying to survive and kind of failing. Um, and even as Anne is haunted by visions of this brutal dark knight wandering the forests, the freaking Death Knight, like D&D style. It's fascinating because we hear these whispers throughout the movie of the horrors of war, right? The terror and brutality of it all, and we kind of get this impression that this Death Knight is undead or perhaps even a demon. And it really plays into like the kind of mystery element, like what is going on here. And then Kit shows up. Kit Harrington's character, he's this very disillusioned gentleman, an old friend of Anne's who sort of comes back with terrible news, terrible, worst news you can get, and then the real conflict of the movie begins, right? Sort of a tug of war, I guess, between his character and the old woman, both of whom are fighting for Anne's affection, I guess you might say, and sort of her attention, and yes, even her love, uh, while the sort of the dark acts, the desperation, right, the sort of reckless greed and want and sin are sort of indulged in, all in the name of survival. The movie kind of ramps up to the arrival of the Death Knight, right? His actual taking the stage, which isn't as much a spoiler, because you see it coming. You know he's gonna show up, right? You know going into it that this is a quote unquote horror movie, so you know the Death Knight's gonna show up, um, in some capacity, and he does show up in some capacity. And we do learn a little bit more about this knight, and we learn even more about the sort of strange curse afflicting him. Though we don't know the specifics, we don't really know how it came to be that this curse on his magical helmet, never how it was it ever came about, shall we say. And it's never fully fleshed out. I don't think that's really what they were going for here. I think the fact that they haven't fleshed it out and have left this magical helm a mystery kind of adds to the horror, because it creates a sort of folk tale element where things just sort of happen as if in a fairy tale, and you don't get answers. This is simply how things are, and that sort of creates this twisted feeling, and there being this sense of unfinished business. I don't think that is entirely a bad thing, at least in this specific instance. It adds to the sort of quiet, lowercase h horror of the story, and a certain fear of the unknown, I guess, right? Even as Anne sort of comes into her own, and Kit Harrington's character, he shows his true colors. There isn't a bad actor in the movie. They do a very good job with the story, even if it isn't quite written the way. If I were given the rough outline of a story like this, I feel like I would have gone differently with, with this sort of story. And no, I actually mean, sort of, I did go a different way with a story like this. I mean, because this movie is on a very similar playing field, I guess, as my own horror novel, Autumn in the Skin, which is a fair bit grander in scope, with much more room to maneuver and to explain certain concepts. I'm not going to be, an arrogant jerk and just say definitively that my book is better than The Dreadful. That would just make me out to be kind of an ass. But but I what I do mean is, if you liked The Dreadful, I have a book that's a little bit similar. And if you were disappointed by The Dreadful, I have a book which might be better and might not disappoint you. So I'm throwing that out there. But I am getting off topic, aren't I? Anyway, The Dreadful is a good movie. That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm saying. I swear, if you go into it with the right expectations, you won't hate it. You might have a good time. And it doesn't answer all your questions, or many of your questions. Really, like, any of your questions. But it just sort of, it does use the supernatural, just sort of because. But the supernatural does add to the movie. It adds to the mystery, makes it feel like a fairy tale, kind of a morality tale. I like that. We should have more movies like this. I mean, it's fine. It's fine. And The Dreadful Remains, honestly, kind of a good movie that people just don't like. I think they were expecting something bigger, grander, more complex and interesting and wild and crazy. But, that's not what it was. It's a little simpler. It's a little it, it's weird to describe it as cute, but in a way that you can only describe a horror movie, it's kind of cute. It's kind of clever, you know, for being what it is. But that's just what I think. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe if so. And you know what? Like and subscribe even if you didn't enjoy the video. Because, it's free for you and it really helps me out. And kindness is everything nowadays. So, yeah, there's that. I've been Connor Landon Freeman, author of fantasy and horror and thrillers and an upcoming science fiction sort of science fantasy thing, which is probably going to confuse the hell out of you, just as it did for me, but possibly in a good way. So, yeah, I hope to see you around. Bye.